All right, let's talk about a tiny, simple two-letter word that could totally change how you see yourself, your work, and, well, everything. And to really get it, we're going to dive into the incredible story of a Michelin-starred restaurateur named Simon Kim. But first, a question for you. Have you ever felt like you had to choose? Like you have to be this thing or that thing? You know that feeling, right? Being pulled in two different directions, having to kind of hide one part of yourself to fit in somewhere else? Well, that's exactly the trap we're going to talk about breaking out of today. So our story kicks off in Seoul, and not just anywhere in Seoul, in Gangnam. Yup, that Gangnam. As a kid, Simon Kim was the king of this neighborhood. He knew everybody, all the shopkeepers knew him, they even called him the Little Mayor. It was a world where he 100% belonged. And then, bam, everything just flips upside down. His family moves to New York. And this isn't the cool America he saw on TV with his hero MacGyver. The reality was a total shock. He couldn't speak English, he knew absolutely no one, and on his very first day of school, a kid walks up and punches him. Just like that, he went from being the little mayor to a complete and total outsider. And this is where the real crisis began. So after years of trying his best to fit in, to assimilate in America, he finally gets to go back to Korea. He's so excited, right? Thinking, finally, I'm home. But his old friends, they didn't see him anymore. All they saw was an American. So now he's trapped. In America, he's the Asian immigrant. In Korea, he's the American. He didn't really belong anywhere. And his words for this feeling, wow, they just hit you right in the gut. It's the sound of being totally alienated. He was stuck in this no man's land between two different worlds, and he wasn't really a citizen of either one. And that feeling, it was about to shape the entire next chapter of his life. So, looking for a place to finally belong, Simon found the restaurant world. And it was perfect, you know? It's kind of a natural home for misfits and immigrants, a whole crew of people who, just like him, didn't quite fit in neatly anywhere else. But even here, in his new sanctuary, that feeling of being an outsider just wouldn't leave him alone. He tells this one devastating story. He's presenting a really expensive bottle of wine to a table, and a customer looks him up and down and asks for a white person to open it. Just a brutal reminder, in the one place he felt safe, that he was still not seen as belonging. But despite all these setbacks, Simon kept pushing. He was chasing this dream of opening his own place. And this next part of the story, it's all about that first restaurant, Pura, and how this identity crisis he was living with would ultimately lead to its downfall. So in this effort to prove that he was a real New York restaurateur, Simon, a Korean American, opens an Italian restaurant. And get this, it even gets a Michelin-star. But something was just off. The famous New York Times food critic Pete Wells absolutely nailed it with this line. He said it all felt awkward, inauthentic. It was technically great, but it had no soul. And after getting that star, Simon felt trapped by that ore thinking all over again. He felt like he had to make a choice. Is Piora the super serious, refined Michelin-star restaurant? Or is it the cool, fun, vibey spot that he originally wanted it to be? He went with Michelin-star guy. And every step he took down that path took him further and further away from what made the place special to begin with. So after 6 years of pouring his heart, his soul, his money, everything into Pura, it failed. He had to close it down. And his description of what that felt like, it's just heartbreaking. I mean, it was a total collapse that made him question absolutely everything about himself. But you know how these stories go. It's almost always in that darkest moment, right there in the wreckage of his biggest failure, that Simon has this massive, life-changing breakthrough, a real epiphany. He finally realized the problem wasn't about finding the right answer. The problem was that he'd been asking the wrong question his entire life. He'd been trying to solve this equation. Am I Korean or American? He was trying to pick a side. But then he thought, wait a minute, what if I don't have to choose at all? And he made one tiny change. He just swapped out that one little word, or became and. He wasn't Korean or American, he was Korean and American. And that simple, tiny shift, it unlocked everything. It let his two identities not just exist next to each other, but actually crash together to create something totally new and way more powerful. And this is the metaphor he uses, and it's just brilliant. When you stop trying to keep two parts of yourself separate and just let them collide, what happens isn't a mess, it's a supernova. It's this incredible explosion of creative energy, A big bang of new possibilities.
Okay, so what does a supernova actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like Simon Kim's Next Restaurant, a place that was built from the ground up on this brand new philosophy.
Everybody meet Kote. This is not an Italian restaurant run by a Korean guy. This is a Korean steakhouse. It is, unapologetically, a Korean barbecue joint and a classic American steakhouse. It's the real-life version of his and philosophy, a place that celebrates both sides of who he is, proudly and authentically. And the result, just like a supernova, it was explosive. It was immediate. It took Cote less than 6 months to get a Michelin star. The authenticity was just electric. You could feel it. And the place became a massive, massive success. And then 2020 happened. The pandemic hits, and they're forced to close their doors. An existential threat. But instead of seeing this as an or situation, we either survive or we fail, Simon and his team just kept using and. They pivoted immediately, and then they pivoted again and again, adding new parts to their identity, refusing to be just one thing.
I mean, just look at this evolution. Cote stopped being just a restaurant. It was a Michelin-star restaurant and a delivery service and a fried chicken pop-up and a national butcher shop. They even became a force for good in the community, donating 5% of their delivery revenue to help feed hungry New Yorkers, proving you can be a successful business and a generous one.
So Simon's story is incredible, no doubt about it. But the real power here isn't just about restaurants. The real question is, how does this apply to your life?
Think about it. We face these false choices all the time. Society loves to put these invisible walls around us. It tells you that you can be a great mother or a successful businesswoman, an artist or an entrepreneur, that you have to choose between being ambitious or being kind. This or thinking makes us believe we have to shrink ourselves down to fit into one box.
But what Simon's journey proves is that when you refuse to accept that scarcity mindset, when you stop choosing between all the different amazing parts of who you are and you start combining them instead, you don't just get a simple sum, you get a supernova. The possibilities truly become endless. So I'm going to leave you with that question to think about. Take a real look at your own life, your career, your passions, your identity. What's the limiting or that you've been living with? And what incredible, explosive, supernova-level new thing could you create if you decided right now to change it to an and?